Hello everyone, this is Panic with a brand new video. Today I am doing a discussion video, which I've not done in a while since the podcast came out. By the way, if you haven't seen the podcast yet, you should check them out because it's a lot of fun, and it's more than just me talking, it's a lot of other people talking too, so they're pretty cool. But basically, I wanted to talk about Yooka-Laylee, wanted to spend some time just talking about that game alone, and because I haven't been able to talk about it too much on the podcast, and I don't want to take over all the time we have there. We usually talk about so many other things, but I wanted to take some time just to really quick talk about Yooka-Laylee and my thoughts on it and stuff. For those of you who don't know, Yooka-Laylee, it's a quote-unquote spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie and other late 90s 3D platformer games that came out on like the Nintendo 64 and stuff, and then other stuff. Anyway, basically, yeah, so Banjo-Kazooie was a great game from what I hear. I've never actually played it, and I feel like that's important for you guys to know while I form my opinions on this and stuff. But basically, I did play a lot of the other 3D platforming collectathons kind of thing, or even just 3D platformers such as Mario. But I played Donkey Kong 64 a lot. When I was younger, I really loved Donkey Kong 64 so much. I loved it to death. Not as much anymore. I recognize some of its problems and stuff. But basically, with that knowledge, I was very eager to try a game that was a 3D platformer collectathon because that genre has been basically dead. So Yooka-Laylee went on Kickstarter and it raised way more money than its wanted amount. Overall, though, compared to modern games, the budget wasn't extremely high. It was relatively normal or even lower in some cases. I forget what the exact numbers were, and I don't want to get it completely wrong. So, but from what I understanding, most modern games have a bigger budget than this game. It still received a lot of support though, and like I said, it surpassed the expectations and stuff. And I think it was in the millions of euros. I'm not sure how that translates into American dollars. But basically, it made a lot more than it expected, but it's still not a ton in modern day standards. So Yooka-Laylee was delayed a ton of times. And until finally, Yooka-Laylee was released, and it's gotten a lot of mixed reviews. It's oh gosh, how do I say this? It's gotten a lot of mixed reviews, which isn't good for a game that had that much support going into it. Naturally, if there's any mixed reviews, I mean, that's going to make a lot of people disappointed just because so many people backed this game, and they're obviously disappointed that it doesn't have as good reviews as it does. Some people really like the game. Some people really don't like the game, and there's also some people in the middle. You get people on all sides of the spectrum for this game, which you don't see extremely often. Basically, my thoughts, coming from someone who hasn't played Banjo-Kazooie, I had a lot of fun with the game. I really like the collecting aspects. I just liked collecting stuff, and I haven't been able to really do that. I was able to explore some of these really cool worlds. The first world you start in, tribal, I can't remember the name, but it's a very, very colorful, vibrant world, and I absolutely loved collecting stuff in it. Then there's the next world, which is like the ice world, and I also really enjoyed that one. A little bit too much water, if you ask me, but it's basically beautiful worlds and stuff. Wasn't too big of the marsh one, but then there's also like Capital Casino, which I personally enjoyed for the most part, and I know a lot of people that's their least favorite map, but that one was fun. The reason I mention a lot of these maps though is just because that plays a big part in the platforming, and overall I do think the maps did pretty darn well, with some exceptions. There were definitely some exceptions, like not like I couldn't say they were all good, right? Because these exceptions are too big. One being that in the ice place, there's just like this confusing labyrinth and stuff, and I was like, oh, do we really need this in a platformer? It was really confusing. The camera angles were annoying and stuff. So there were a lot of instances like that where the maps weren't as great. However, for the most part, I really enjoyed the maps and the platforming in them. I think this game's biggest problem was just general polish. And the problem is, when your polish isn't that good, that sticks out like a sore thumb for the rest of the stuff. Not a lot of people are going to acknowledge how good the gameplay is when the polish is that bad. So it's kind of already in a rough spot. I'm not saying that the bad reviews are not deserved. They, for the most part, are. Not necessarily. Okay, wait, hang on. I gotta back up. But basically, I understand where a lot of people are coming from when they say they don't like this game. because the polishing does get in the way and it does affect your experience in the long run. Even just frame rate problems, that gets in the way of the experience, and then also general polish bugs, you could say. I guess that just means bugs. Like, just general bugs definitely gets in the way. A lot of people were talking about the buggy camera. I personally didn't have any problems with it, but I got the game after it already had some patches and stuff. So from my understanding, it had already been fixed by the time I played it. There was only one instance where the camera really, really messed with me, and that was the first boss fight. And I think everyone can agree that they botched it for the first boss fight as far as the camera goes, because it will kill you several times. So the big problems people had was A, the camera, B, the bugs and stuff, and then C, running issues like frame rate and whatnot. Then there's also the content. A lot of people didn't like the amount of content. This is where I kind of disagree with the people's claims on how deep the game is. I personally found a lot of depth, and I feel like if you're going for the 100%, you're going to have a good amount of playtime in it. Still, not a ton. Most games, when you do 100%, you're going to get a lot more than you would for this game. But at the end of the day, for a $40 game, it's putting in 24 hours. That's not horrible. And I say 24 hours because that's how long it took for me to almost complete it. I technically didn't complete because there's a few stars, or rather pages, that are just infuriating to get, and I didn't want to spend any more time on it. But basically, no, that's kind of a good segue into collectibles. I do think this game is not that deep, or I should say I do think this game is deep enough. A lot of people said they would like an extra world. I guess I wouldn't mind an extra world and then have less be in the worlds they are now. But I feel like the extra world is just for cosmetic stuff. That'd be the only reason I'd want it, because I do feel like there's already enough in the worlds they have. Where was I? Okay, so yeah. So basically, each world you can collect 25 pages, which is like the main collectibles, and then you can also get like a ton. I think it was like 200 quills, which are these like little feathers around and stuff. And then you can also get other stuff that upgrades your powers and stuff. You can get a butterfly that upgrades your health. You can get a electric meter that upgrades your stamina. And then you can also get a what was the last thing? I can't even remember what the last. Oh, a Rextro coin. This doesn't really help you, but this helps you play a mini game, like an arcade game, like you could do in Donkey Kong 64 and stuff. And there's a lot of references or throwbacks to Donkey Kong 64 and stuff, and I enjoyed most of it. Just learning moves in general, I thought that was a cool concept, and I feel like the moves were way better done than they did in Donkey Kong 64. In Donkey Kong 64, they all felt like keys. Like, every move felt like, I would never use this in an actual situation except for to unlock this area. And I feel like that's not how you're supposed to do moves. I feel like Yooka-Laylee did a very good job with their moves. They added stuff like flight. That helps a ton. They added like a spin roll, which I didn't realize how much times I'd be using. They added this thing called like a sonic blast, which sends out like a bubble around you. Like, all these moves I ended up using several times for different circumstances of fighting different enemies and stuff. There's a few exceptions with invisibility. While there's a lot of pages you can get with that, invisibility is not extremely useful otherwise. There was also the what am I thinking of? The invincibility thing. I use that one a good amount, actually. It's just at the end of the game, so I guess naturally you wouldn't get it a ton. But basically, I felt like the moves were done really well, and you use quills to buy moves. This is where I think they could have done a little better, though. All of the moves are dirt cheap. You just need a handful of quills, which is kind of good, I guess. Except you eventually find out that there's like no reason to collect any more quills unless you're just going for the 100% thing. And even when you do get all the quills, you do get a pagey. But what's another pagey at that point if you're already completing the game? And I feel like this is where Yooka-Laylee went wrong with their collectible system. I feel like there should have been more things relying on the collectibles you get other than the sake of 100%. For an example, there is nothing you get even for 100%, except for like an award. You don't get like a special cutscene or like a thank you from the developers or something like that. There's no invincibility you get for running around. I think you get blue pants, I think, which is a throwback to Banjo-Kazooie. Like I said, I never played Banjo-Kazooie, so I don't really understand the nostalgic impact that carries. But overall, I personally would prefer more things granted to you for collecting more rewards for collecting more. Instead, they always just seem to rely on pages. As soon as you would collect all this, you'd get a pagey. And what did you do with those pages? You could unlock worlds and expand them and stuff, but you'll quickly realize that that's not even really a problem. You have all the pages in the world. Not all the pages in the world, but I mean, you never can not afford something. So buying stuff with pages is essentially worthless, except for at the beginning of the game. Because, like, it happens so fast, you just get enough pages where you can already upgrade everything in the world anyway. So, at the end of the day, pages aren't worth that much. And it's like, okay, so you get the Rextro coin, and that unlocks a minigame. So that's kind of cool if the minigames were good, which, quite honestly, most of them aren't. I think there's one or two that I enjoyed, but most of them are just buggy and lame. But basically, you get the Rextro coin so that you can play a minigame, and that's fun. If you like the minigame, you play the minigame. After you do the minigame, you get a pagey from that. You're like, oh, okay, wait. So I just basically kind of use the coin to get a pagey. So it's just kind of like collecting for the sake of collecting again. When they could have just got rid of the coin altogether, and it would have been the same. I would have had the same outcome. I would have just gotten a pagey from the game anyway. You technically get 2 pages because you have to do it, and then you have to beat a high score. Why you have to do it twice is beyond me, but you do. It's really annoying when some of those minigames are just infuriating. But anyway, there's a couple instances of collecting for the sake of collecting. Donkey Kong 64 is extremely it's extremely known for doing that also. It's a big problem, right? It's extremely guilty. That's what I was looking for. It's extremely guilty of having so many collectibles that have no point in being collected, but you collect them anyway. And I feel like Yooka-Laylee suffered from that just a little bit. Not too bad, not to the extent of that. I think a great step forward was having collectibles that increase your health, like the butterfly, and the collectibles that increase your stamina, like the energy meter. And then there was also the a world thing. Like, it was a weird thing with swirls around it. It was like a world with eyes on it. I don't even know what it was called. But you basically give that to someone to get a new transformation. That's kind of cool if you like to transform into different things. However, the transformations generally you can only get 1 or 2 pages from anyway. So it is just another, like, you collect this so you can collect 2 more pages instead of cutting out the middle guy and just getting those 2 pages. I feel like that's where collecting kind of goes wrong. I feel like you should never... I feel like a big problem with the collecting games in the past is when they did do collecting just for the sake of collecting. You had no reward and no help for the actual game. I believe that's a problem. I do think it's a problem. But I'm more disappointed, though, about this world thing. I forget what it's called. Because you get transformations, but the transformations just could have been so much more. They could have really capitalized on that. Even if they just made it to where you could get several different pages from the transformation. Like, if they capped it at 5 each, right? You just get 5 pages each for each transformation. I feel like that wouldn't be too much to ask for, and you get to utilize these fun transformations and stuff. Generally, though, transformations weren't even fun, in my opinion. The flower that you get in the first one, that's not very fun. Excuse me. Sorry. What else? There was the snow truck you get in the snow one. That one wasn't really fun. That was so hard to control. Flower was just sluggish and slow. What was the one in the marsh? The marsh of your piranhas. That's a cool idea. And actually, that's one of the ones I enjoyed more of because you could swim around and stuff, and you could have a cool attack where you could attack things underwater. And I felt like you just generally use that more than some of the others. But in the space place, you got the boat. The idea was cool of being able to use all these different weapon crafts and stuff, but there was so little to do with the boat. You did get to fight a boss fight in it, which is swell, but overall, the boat didn't control very well, and it wasn't used very often, so it didn't feel great. And the seas you did it in were so bland and empty, so that was a bit of a problem. There's the helicopter, which I personally enjoyed. I know a lot of people didn't. I liked it, but again, there wasn't much to do with it. You just blow up some things to get more collectibles and stuff, which, by the way, Capital Casino suffers deeply from collecting for the sake of collecting in... Sometimes. Only sometimes. Okay, so there's these coins that you collect, right? It's essentially you collect 5 coins and you get a pagey. So it's a way to divvy out coins in different places without giving you all the pages. And I can kind of understand that, but the problem is sometimes they'll give you more than 5. So it's like you're doing less for more at certain cases. In some cases, you're doing more for less. And I think more for less isn't too bad. They just want to, add more stuff to do in the level, more challenges and whatnot. And that's a little bit different from collecting for the sake of collecting. In some cases, it was collecting for collecting because you would get more and stuff. And it's like, okay, so really I'm just getting more pages for doing less and stuff. And that was annoying. But basically, yeah, transformations could have been a lot more. The rewards for collecting could have been a lot better for certain things. Like I said, Butterfly was fun. The energy thing was cool too. But I would have mainly liked to see something done more with quills or even pages. They had these things called tonics, and I really like the tonic idea. It's basically like power-ups that power your guy up, but they don't necessarily make you OP. You just use them. You can only have one at a time. I feel like if you use quills, maybe you could use quills to unlock them instead of random things, because unlocking them was so random, and you would unlock them all automatically anyway. I don't see why they didn't tie that in with the quills, so that you could pay quills, and it would give more value to quills, and maybe you could turn in some pages to use 2 tonics at a time. I just feel like there's a lot more they could have done with the tonics instead of just, you unlock them over time, you could just choose one. And I don't know, I just feel like it would give more value to either quills or the pages, which the value to collectibles is something Yooka-Laylee could really use, especially for quills. When you just get them freaking everywhere and you already have all the moves, what are you going to do with all these quills? What is your incentive for keep getting these quills? And pages are a little bit more understandable because pages usually have a challenge tied to them and stuff. And an event, something that's fun, right? That's what it comes down to, something that's like fun. And it could be getting to a certain point in a map that's really hard to get to. The thing with quills, though, is that they're just littered everywhere, and they don't really have challenges attached to them, and they're just like sometimes in completely random spots and non-rewarding spots. So the quills value is very low in this game. I'm talking about a lot of the stuff I dislike about it first. I am going to talk about a lot of the stuff I like about it, because I do think I like it more than a lot of other people. I just wanted to get some of these practical problems out of the way, because I feel like so many problems people have with this game are kind of impractical things to ask for with these guys' budget in their background. That's why I even went over the budget at the beginning. It's important to understand this history, not necessarily to review the game per se, to critique it and stuff, but just to know the ins and outs and understand why things happen the way they did. I am definitely not saying that you shouldn't rate a game poorly just because it had, a low budget. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that just so that you can understand why some of these problems exist, like frame rate and just general lack of polish. Honestly, the game needed more time, and they delayed it as much as they could, but they ran out of money and they just couldn't delay it anymore. They had to release it, because the longer you delay it, the more mouths you have to feed with that money, and the more development has to go into it and stuff. It just generally, it costs more money to delay, but they had to delay it as much as they could, and eventually they just couldn't. They were out of money, and so people started asking for refunds at a certain point, and they couldn't give it back just because they needed the money, and that was pretty sad. And I feel bad for both people at that point. But basically, a lot of the problems people have tie in with that, and just some of the I just wanted to go over some of the practical problems that could have been fixed. Like I said, more value to collectibles. That is something that doesn't really need money. If you just changed your time and thought harder about how these things should be spent, I feel like that would have helped the game a lot and made it gone a long way. Another thing is transformations. I feel like you don't need extra money to make your transformations half decent. I think you could have got a lot farther with that too. So this video, I'm just kind of listing, all these practical stuff that they could have fixed, but I also want to talk about stuff I personally enjoyed about the game. And now's probably a good enough time to do that. I believe I've expressed myself enough for the last 18 minutes. Overall, though, like I said, I did enjoy the game. It did remind me so much of 3D platformers back in the day, of Donkey Kong 64. And I didn't even play Banjo-Kazooie, and I still felt reminiscent of, those days and stuff, because I could tell it was made by the same team. You could feel that kind of charm, that British humor, that just that general touch that Rareware has on its games and stuff. Music, outstanding music, and I will continue to listen to music even though I don't play the game anymore. And I'm hoping that the soundtrack at least gets more attention, because I know since the game kind of flopped a bit, that it might not get as much attention, but the soundtrack is great. You should totally check it out. Grant Kirkhope is amazing, obviously. Then of course there's tracks by David Wise, and he's another great sound composer. And he worked on some minecart levels, and minecart levels I do want to quickly talk about. I feel like those had a lot of promise. I feel like they could have been better, but they were really hard to control. Certain ones I actually really enjoyed certain ones, but then there's others that I absolutely wanted to just pull my hair out. Namely the one in Capital Casino, and then also the one in space, I think it was. I couldn't stand it. I wanted to stop playing, but I kept doing it, and I was able to beat both of them. But the music for the minecart levels, it actually sounds like Donkey Kong Country music, and I love it. I love it just felt like Donkey Kong Country music during a minecart level, and you could tell that it was the same composer. But yeah, anyway, the music was great, and it was a very pretty game. Like I said, very vibrant worlds and big worlds, and I feel like they don't get enough credit. Even Capital Casino, even though people say it's a little bit barren, and it is a little bit, it's still very pretty, and it's nice to see they have like a miniature golf area, and like just like a lot of like gambling stuff shrunk down or expand or bigger grown. I don't know. I basically love the aesthetics of most of the worlds in here. The Marsh one, that's the one I wasn't really on board with. I liked the space one a good amount. I liked seeing all those different planets in the background, and like those tubes and stuff, the shiny tubes. It really did feel very spacey, yet it had its own unique twist to it, and that was like, it was like a sea, which is kind of cool. And the actual sea part was pretty barren. I was disappointed in that, but yeah, overall though, I did like the worlds they had. I don't mind too much that there wasn't another world, because I didn't feel like I had a problem finding. I didn't feel like I didn't have anything to do. Also, it should be noted that the hub world, Ivory Towers, that's what it's called. A lot of people have complaints about this one as well. I feel like you will enjoy it more if you don't look at it as a hub world, but you look at it as another world you go into, because the level design is just confusing to get to different worlds. That goes without saying, and that's a problem. But if you look at it as just a sixth world, and just like a start and a finish, and there's all these collectibles laid throughout it, I'm sure you'll enjoy it a lot more. And I enjoyed it a lot more once I started looking at it that way. There's a lot of things I liked about it too, just the general factory aspect. There were certain areas that would like look crazy good and stuff, and I would go over there and there'd be like one page, and I'm like, wait, is this place really not important at all? It was almost like they spent too much time on the hub world, and they could have just made it less complex and spent more time on some of these other aspects that I mentioned earlier, some of the practical things they could have fixed. But overall, there was a lot to do in the hub world. That's kind of like a sixth world, and all the other worlds were a lot of fun. Overall, and the platforming. Of course, I got to talk about the platforming, the core of this gameplay besides collecting stuff. The platforming felt great. It was jumping around with Yooka-Laylee just felt so good to me. Flying was a little spotty here and there, but just the nice double jump and the glide felt great. All these different moves that I talked about earlier that were so good, I feel like those really helped the platforming. And if the only thing about this game was platforming, and everyone knew that going in, that was like literally the only thing, this game would have gotten great reviews, I'm sure of it, because the platforming just feels great. It jumping onto different platforms and stuff. It's hard to explain how great it is, but if you've ever played like a Mario game or something with good platforming, and you felt it, you're like, oh yeah, that's good. Like, that's what it feels like playing Yooka-Laylee, right? You can't really say why it's good, you just know it's good, basically. That's what it comes down to. All the different jumps were great, the backflip and stuff, or the back jump, and where you would like the jump on the tail or whatever. Gliding felt nice. Flying was a little bit iffy, but just in general, it felt great exploring those worlds with those really nice jumping. And I feel like that's oftentimes gets overshadowed by, like I said, polish and, of course, bugs and stuff. And camera. A lot of people had problems with the camera. I didn't have too much problems. It only really altered my experience maybe 3 times most throughout the game. Once was during the boss fight, and the other 2 guys were just like scattered somewhere. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed the game. wasn't a lot of character depth, I should say. I'm trying to say all this stuff because I'm ending the video pretty soon. But yeah, characters were a little bit on the lamer side, I thought. But I'm not sure how much better they could have done with the limited resources they had. Dr. Quack's quiz times were infuriating, not because they were hard, just because it slowed down the game. They just didn't need to be there, honestly. And the character voices were annoying, and there's you could skip most of them, but every once in a while there's this unskippable, and it's just so annoying, and you would just go through it so many times. They're adding unskippable stuff though. Excuse me. This is all said before the Spit and Polish update, so maybe I'll play it again sometime. Probably not. I mean, I already pretty much completed it, but anyway, those are my thoughts on Yooka-Laylee. I just thought I should get out there. And I know it's not extremely relevant anymore. The game came out a while ago. But I still had a lot of stuff I want to say about it. Here's to a Hat in Time, which is looking better and better by each trailer. But then again, that's what a lot of people said about Yooka-Laylee. So, who knows? Who knows? Hopefully a Hat in Time can get it right. Also, Mario Odyssey, of course, looks outstanding, and I have high hopes for that game, and I can't wait to play it. But that's not even necessarily collectathon, I don't think. That's more just platforming. But either way, 3D platformers are a lot of fun. It's a shame that Yooka-Laylee couldn't do it quite right enough. I think my final consensus is that the game is good, not great. I think I can't really express myself farther than that. So, anyway, thank you guys all so much for watching. Like I said, I got podcasts. You can make sure you check that out if you enjoy podcasts. There's a playlist on my channel. And then also subscribe if you'd like to see Let's Plays and other discussions and animations and stuff like that. All this other stuff I do. That's all, though. Thank you guys for watching. So long.